everyone, welcome to my channel. If you like fun, colorful earrings and dopamine dressing, I'm your girl. I'm Shauna of Rue & Rue, and today I'm having a special tutorial on how to make my I Heart You earrings. So make sure to hit that follow. Let's get started. Hi everyone, so let's get started. I'm going to give you some tips and tricks that you might not otherwise know if you're new to making with polymer clay. But the first thing you have to do is actually condition the clay, which is breaking down the polymers. It is a plasticine based material. You're breaking it down and you'll see that the edges are kind of cut up looking. It doesn't look very smooth and unified. So your goal is to get it so that the clay is nice and soft and malleable and doesn't have any of those cuts around the edges or frayed edges. I get it thin enough and then I actually put it through a pasta machine. I usually do 2, and I'll start at 0, then go up to 1, and then up to 2, and put it through at a 2 probably 10 to 12 times till it's nice and thin and very malleable, like I said. I earlier was using saran wrap over the clay. I like to use saran wrap because it creates a nice round edge on the cutters. It also keeps the cutters clean. So for cutters like this one I'm using here that has a detail, it can be a little harder to use the saran wrap, so you do have to use a lot of force and press down really hard. Otherwise, those details don't show up as well. So you want to make sure that you're really pressing down hard. Sometimes I'll use a flat surface. I actually have this metal piece that sometimes I'll use to really get enough force behind it and make sure that the cutter is going all the way through to the tile. These metal cutters that I'm using are a lot sharper and they don't require as much fiddling to get a nice clean cut, but those plastic cutters, you definitely need to use a lot more pressure, especially with the saran wrap. But I try to get as many pieces out of the slab. So here I'm trying to get at least 2 different pairs of earrings. And I want to make sure that I have all the pieces that I need for those earrings. So as you can see here, I'm just kind of going sort of willy-nilly all around the slab and finding little nooks where I have space so that I'm using as much of this clay as I can. Now I will preserve all the scraps and re-roll them and use them to create additional slabs, or there's all sorts of other ways that I use scraps. If you'd like to see a video on that, let me know in the comments. But I have lots of ways that I use scrap. But when I have a lot of scrap, I will just reform it into another slab. So once I've cut out all the pieces that I need, I'm going to remove the saran wrap. And then I remove the excess clay from the slab, so all the little in-between bits. And like I said, this is the clay that I'll preserve and then re-roll into a new slab. But I'll take my time and get all of that extra clay off so that I have nice clean edges. Then I will work on removing them from the tile. Now sometimes I bake right on the tile, but for these earrings, they're double layered, meaning I have another piece, as you'll see here, that's going to go on top of another piece. So I'm going to make sure with my fingers, I'm going to smooth out the edges since it's harder to sand those edges post-bake. Make sure the edges are nice and smooth. And then I'm going to take my time centering them on top of that base heart and make sure I really like where they're positioned. I just eyeball it. I'm not doing anything special, but make sure I like how that looks. So for my finishing touches, I go through with a Dremel and I make sure my edges are nice and smooth. I use felt sanders because polymer clay is super soft. You don't need to use anything super abrasive. Once my edges are clean, I'm going to go through and add with my jump ring my little details, my little dangly droplets. And I like to twist open the jump ring instead of pulling them apart. When you pull them apart, you will actually distort the jump ring and make it not look as nice and round. So as you can see here, I just hold one end and then with the other end twist outwards. My holes were pre-drilled for the purpose of this video, but you can see here that I used a machine drill. I didn't use a handheld drill. I like to use a drill press. It's so easy, so convenient. I will show you my drill press in another upcoming video. But then I'm using a paint marker to fill in the little indents. I love using acrylic paint. It's so satisfying. Watch how smoothly it goes on. But I'm just taking a acrylic paint pen and I'm filling in all those little details so that they really pop. You definitely don't have to do this, but for the I Heart You earrings, this is a detail I added so that it created a more graphic effect on these earrings. And I was super happy with how those turned out. If they end up getting a little dirty, you can just take a little alcohol and rub off the excess. You can also use a sander, and if you get excess on the clay, you can remove that as well. So now I'm just going to add that piece to the top part, and that will be the final section of the earring itself, all completed. Then I'm going to use a glue to attach the backs. I like to glue first, and then I will actually go in later and resin the backs on. This way they are super secure, they will not budge, and your earrings will last for many years to come. I like to do the glue and resin method. I hope you enjoyed that tutorial and learned something. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. Or if you have any interest in future videos, let me know. I would love to make what you guys are interested in seeing. So thanks again for watching, and until next time,